bright stage lights shone down on the sleek, modern set of The Frontline, one of the most watched talk shows in America. The crowd murmured with anticipation as the show's host, Darren Mitchell, adjusted his microphone. He was known for his sharp wit and pointed questions, especially when it came to conservative guests. Tonight, his target was none other than Carrie Underwood. The country music superstar sat poised in her chair, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. She was no stranger to interviews, but she could already sense that this one was going to be different. Darren's smirk gave away his intentions before he even spoke. "Carrie," he began smoothly, "you've been a household name for years. An icon, really. But some people think your music, your faith, and let's be honest, your political leanings are a little outdated. What do you say to those who believe country music, especially with its deep ties to faith and patriotism, is out of step with modern America?" The audience reacted with a mix of polite laughter and murmurs. It was a loaded question, and Carrie knew it. She folded her hands in her lap, tilting her head slightly before answering. "Well, Darren," she said with a soft but confident smile, "music is about storytelling. It's about connection. And last time I checked, faith and patriotism weren't things that expire like a carton of milk." The audience chuckled at her quick-witted response, and Darren's smirk faltered for just a second before he pressed on. "Fair enough," he said, regaining his composure. "But let's talk about inclusivity. Country music has a history of being, let's say, exclusive. Some critics believe that your songs, especially the ones with strong religious themes, don't resonate with younger, more progressive audiences. Do you think your message is, well, divisive?" Carrie let out a small laugh. "Music is supposed to be personal. It's supposed to be honest. And for me, my faith is a big part of who I am. If someone doesn't like a song because it mentions God, they don't have to listen to it. That's the beauty of choice. Just like I don't listen to certain artists if their message doesn't resonate with me." The audience applauded, and Darren's smile tightened. He wasn't used to guests handling his pointed questions so smoothly. He leaned forward, deciding to push harder. "But Carrie," he said, his tone growing sharper, "don't you think that kind of thinking, if you don't like it, don't listen, is a bit dismissive? I mean, you have millions of fans. Do you ever think about how your words, your beliefs, might alienate people?" Carrie's expression remained serene, but there was an unmistakable spark in her eyes. "You know, Darren," she said, "I find it interesting that this concern only seems to come up when someone expresses traditional values. No one's telling pop stars they shouldn't sing about partying or heartbreak because it might alienate someone who doesn't live that lifestyle. Yet when I sing about faith, suddenly I need to consider if I'm being too exclusive." A few people in the audience clapped, and Darren opened his mouth to respond, but Carrie wasn't done. "Music is meant to be authentic. My faith is part of my life, and I won't apologize for that. Just like other artists don't apologize for singing about their beliefs or lack of them. That's the real inclusivity, Darren. Letting everyone be who they are without having to change to fit some imaginary mold of what's acceptable today." The applause was louder this time. Darren shifted in his seat, realizing he had underestimated her. He needed a new angle. "Okay," he said, nodding. "I can respect that. But let's talk about something else that's been making headlines. You've been seen at events supporting conservative values, and some people have criticized you for not being vocal about certain social issues. Do you ever feel pressure to use your platform for activism?" Carrie sighed, her expression calm but firm. "There's a lot of pressure on public figures to take a stand on every issue under the sun. But here's the thing. I'm a singer. My job is to make music, not to be a political commentator. I think people forget that entertainers are human beings too. We have personal beliefs, but that doesn't mean we have to turn every song, every interview, into a debate." Darren tried to cut in, but Carrie wasn't finished. "I've always believed in kindness, respect, and treating people with love. That doesn't mean I have to tweet about every trending topic to prove I care. Sometimes the loudest statements aren't made in press releases, but in how you treat people every single day." The audience erupted into applause, and even Darren couldn't hide his surprise. She wasn't just answering his questions, she was dismantling his entire approach. He chuckled, shaking his head. "I have to say, Carrie, you handle yourself well." She smiled. "I've had practice." Darren knew he had lost this round, but he still had a show to finish. "All right," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Final question. If you had one message for your critics, what would it be?" Carrie didn't hesitate. "I'd say that music is supposed to bring people together, not tear them apart. We may have different beliefs, different values, but at the end of the day, we all want love, happiness, and hope. That's what I focus on. And if that bothers some people, well, that's their problem, not mine." The audience exploded into cheers. Within hours, clips of the interview flooded social media. "Carrie Underwood destroys liberal talk show host," headlines screamed. Her responses went viral, with fans and even some critics praising her. Grace under fire. Darren Mitchell had invited Carrie Underwood onto his show expecting an easy target. Instead, he got a masterclass in composure, confidence, and unwavering conviction. And the world was watching. As the applause echoed through the studio, Darren Mitchell knew he had lost control of the narrative. Carrie Underwood had just turned his own game against him with poise and authenticity. He forced a smile, but the tension in his posture was clear. Carrie, on the other hand, remained relaxed. She had faced critics before. This was nothing new. But what made this moment different was how the audience responded. They weren't just clapping out of courtesy. They were genuinely moved. Some were standing, others were nodding along in agreement, and Darren couldn't ignore the shift in energy. Backstage, the show's producers scrambled. This wasn't how they expected the interview to go. They had lined up social media snippets in advance, anticipating Carrie stumbling over tough questions or dodging controversy. Instead, they had footage of her completely owning the conversation without breaking a sweat. Darren cleared his throat, attempting to steer the show back in his favor. "Well, Carrie, I have to admit, you've given me a lot to think about. Maybe I'll have to start listening to more country music." She grinned. "You should. I'll send you a playlist." The audience erupted into laughter, and even Darren chuckled, though it was clear he wasn't entirely amused. The camera zoomed in on Carrie as she gracefully handled what was meant to be an ambush. By the time the show wrapped, social media had already caught fire. Clips of the interview spread across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Conservative voices hailed her as a beacon of strength and authenticity, while even some neutral observers admitted that she had outclassed Darren at every turn. One particular clip, a moment where Carrie delivered her powerful line about inclusivity being about allowing everyone to be themselves, began trending under Carrie Underwood Clapback. Within hours, it had millions of views. Celebrities chimed in, with some praising her ability to stand firm without hostility, while others accused her of dodging political responsibility. Carrie, however, paid little attention to the noise. She wasn't interested in online debates. After leaving the studio, she met up with her husband, Mike Fisher, who had been watching from the green room. "You handled that like a pro," he said, giving her a proud smile. She shrugged. "I just told the truth." Mike chuckled. "Well, the internet seems to think you just took down half of Hollywood." Carrie laughed, shaking her head. "I wasn't trying to take anyone down, just standing my ground." As they walked to their car, reporters and paparazzi were already outside, flashing cameras and shouting questions. "Carrie, what do you think about the backlash?" "Carrie, did you expect your interview to go viral?" "Carrie, any response to Darren's comments after the show?" She simply smiled and waved, choosing not to feed the media frenzy. Meanwhile, Darren Mitchell was back at his studio office, staring at his phone. His team was frantically trying to spin the situation, but the truth was undeniable. Carrie had completely outshined him. In private, he was fuming. He had counted on her being defensive, unsure, even intimidated. Instead, she had controlled the conversation with grace and intelligence. That night, major news outlets covered the exchange, with conservative and independent voices praising Carrie for her unwavering stance. Even some liberal commentators admitted that Darren had underestimated her. But for Carrie, the real victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in the messages she received from fans, people who told her they felt inspired, that her words had given them confidence to stand up for their own beliefs. The next morning, as she scrolled through messages of support, Carrie simply smiled. She hadn't gone on the front line to make headlines. She had gone to share her story. The fact that it resonated with so many, that was just a bonus. As Carrie sat in her kitchen the next morning, sipping a cup of coffee, her phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, fellow artists, and even people she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out. Some praised her for standing her ground, while others were shocked at how quickly the interview had spiraled into something much bigger than expected. She wasn't one to chase controversy, but she also wasn't one to back down when challenged. And that's exactly what people loved about her. Mike sat across from her, scrolling through his own phone. "Babe, you're everywhere. Even people who don't follow country music are talking about you." Carrie smirked. "Well, that's a first." Mike turned his phone around to show her a tweet from a well-known political commentator. "Carrie Underwood just gave a masterclass in how to shut down biased media with grace. Hollywood, take notes." Carrie shook her head, laughing. "I wasn't trying to shut down anyone. I was just being honest." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, honesty apparently breaks the internet now." Just then, her phone rang. It was her manager. She answered, expecting another update about media coverage. "Carrie, you won't believe this," her manager said, excitement in her voice. "Your album sales just spiked overnight. Downloads, streams, everything is through the roof. People are rallying behind you." Carrie blinked. "Wait, seriously?" "Seriously. And not just your latest album, your older records too. People are rediscovering your music because of that interview." Carrie leaned back in her chair, processing the unexpected news. It wasn't that she needed a boost in sales. She had, long ago, solidified herself as one of the biggest names in country music. But knowing that her words had connected with so many people, that meant something. Mike grinned. "So, let me get this straight. You go on a talk show, refuse to let them bully you, and now half of America is downloading your music?" Carrie chuckled. "Guess I should do interviews more often." Her manager continued, "Oh, and by the way, you might want to check your Instagram. You've gained nearly 1 million new followers overnight." Carrie opened the app and saw the notifications, flooding in. Among the comments were thousands of messages of support. One caught her eye from a young woman who wrote, "Carrie, I've always been scared to speak up about my faith and values, but after watching you handle that interview, I feel stronger. Thank you for showing us how to stand firm with kindness." Carrie's smile softened. That was the real victory. Not the trending hashtags, not the album sales, but the fact that her words had encouraged people. Meanwhile, Darren Mitchell wasn't having such a great morning. His social media pages were flooded with comments calling him out for trying to trap Carrie in a gotcha moment. Even some of his usual supporters were criticizing him for underestimating her. His producers were in full damage control mode, trying to spin the narrative. "Darren," one of them said, pacing his office, "we need to address this. Maybe put out a statement?" Darren sighed, rubbing his temples. "What am I supposed to say? Sorry I lost an argument to a country singer?" The producer hesitated. "Well, yeah. Or at least frame it as an open dialogue moment. Show that you respect different viewpoints." Darren groaned. The last thing he wanted was to admit defeat, but the backlash wasn't dying down. If anything, it was growing. That evening, the Frontline issued a carefully worded statement on social media. "We appreciate all perspectives and always encourage open discussions. Carrie Underwood is a talented artist, and we're grateful she joined us for a spirited conversation. Looking forward to many more." But the comments under the post weren't having it. Translation: Carrie destroyed you, and now you're pretending. It was a friendly debate. Darren tried to ambush her and got embarrassed on his own show. Love to see it. Carrie didn't just win, she dominated. As the internet continued to celebrate Carrie's response, she remained unfazed. She wasn't in it for the drama. Instead, she spent her evening at home with her family, playing with her kids and working on new music, because while the world was busy talking about her, she was already focused on what really mattered, and that's what made her different. That's what made her unstoppable. The following morning, Carrie Underwood woke up to another round of headlines. News outlets, entertainment blogs, and even political commentators were dissecting the interview, calling it everything from a brilliant display of grace under fire to the ultimate media takedown. Major networks invited her for follow-up interviews, and her team fielded calls from journalists eager to get her reaction to the viral moment. Some wanted her to elaborate on her views, while others were hoping she'd engage in a back and forth with Darren Mitchell. But Carrie wasn't interested in dragging this out. She wasn't about to turn a one-time interview into an ongoing spectacle. Instead of responding to media requests, she decided to address the situation in her own way. That afternoon, she sat on the porch of her Nashville home, the sunlight filtering through the trees, and recorded a short video for her fans. She held her phone up and spoke directly to the camera, her tone calm and sincere. Hey, y'all. I just wanted to take a second to say thank you for all the love and support over the past couple of days. It's been overwhelming in the best way. I never went on that interview to make a statement or prove a point. I just answered questions, honestly, like I always do. She smiled, shaking her head. I think sometimes people forget that musicians, actors, and public figures are just people. We have beliefs, values, and experiences that shape us, just like everyone else. And that's okay. We don't all have to agree, but we should respect each other enough to let people be who they are. She paused for a moment, then continued. I've seen so many of your messages, stories from people who feel encouraged to stand by their faith, their convictions, or just to be themselves without fear of judgment. That means more to me than any headline or social media trend ever could, so thank you for that. I love you all, and I'll see you on the road soon. With that, she ended the video and posted it to her Instagram and Twitter pages. Within minutes, the video went viral. Fans flooded the comments with praise, calling her a class act and a role model in every sense. Even some celebrities chimed in, admiring her refusal to get dragged into the media circus. Meanwhile, Darren Mitchell and his team watched the video from his studio office. One of his producers sighed. Well, that settles it. She's not taking the bait. Darren leaned back in his chair, a frustrated look on his face. He had been hoping she'd respond with some sort of challenge or call-out, something that would give him a chance to regain control of the narrative. Instead, she had taken the high road, and in doing so, she had won yet again. One of his assistants checked the latest ratings for the front line. Darren? You're not gonna like this. Darren exhaled sharply. What now? Last. Tonight's episode saw a major ratings drop, and social media sentiment about the show is mostly negative. A lot of people feel like you went after her unfairly. Darren clenched his jaw. His show had always thrived on controversy, but this time, the public had turned against him. He knew he had underestimated Carrie Underwood, but there was nothing he could do about it now. Carrie, on the other hand, was already moving forward. She spent the next few days focused on what she loved most, her family, her music, and her fans. She rehearsed for her upcoming tour, knowing that no viral moment, no TV interview, and certainly no media drama could ever define her. Because, at the end of the day, Carrie Underwood wasn't just a country music star. She was a woman who knew exactly who she was. And that, more than anything, was why she always came